There you go. All right, so we got Angel, fantabulous. We got a CTA, and he's going to tell us about his journey. But I just wanted to remind everybody as well that we have Forcelandia on July 13th and 14th in Portland. And then we also have Tahoe Dreamin' coming up in August. And you can catch me talking about Slack at Tahoe Dreamin' as well. So very exciting. And then also, I know it's a ways out there, but in October, we have North Africa Dreamin' for anyone that is in EMEA. And I'll also be talking about Slack at North Africa Dreamin', and I can't wait to go back to Casablanca. And then Paul, if you want to remind us of when your user group is.
It's the third Wednesday of every month. We just had it last month. The next one, gosh, I don't have my calendar set up yet, but it will. It will be the July 27th.
Nice, yeah. And so try to make it the Dallas Developer User Group. It's a fabulous group. They have this chat beforehand, so you can just like hang out, kind of like your IRL from back in the day. And I think you just went back to in person, didn't you, Paul?
Yeah, we're actually we're going hybrid. So we're meeting in person at UTD, and then we also keep up the Zoom online. And so I've got enough equipment that I bring to UTD with me to try and keep everybody on camera and make them feel like they're in the room with everybody in person. So we keep an international audience there. So we'll be having Angel on, hopefully, I think in, did we say August, Angel?
We talked, I think it was August, yeah.
Okay, so targeting that, yeah.
Dude, usually you're just getting booked by everybody. Everybody wants to chat with you. We got
it's all about giving back. I'll talk about it. I think that's important as part of the journey, is doing that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Paul, I'm going to pass, if you got nothing else, I'm going to pass it over to Angel. I know he's got a lot of awesome stuff to share, and I'm excited to see, since I get to be working the booth during his presentation. I can't wait to hear it. So yeah.
Go on. Great.
All right, I'm going to mute myself, and then Angel, you can share whenever. You should have full presenting rights.
Awesome. So let me share here. This should be the presentation. So let me know when you guys see it.
I can see it.
Awesome. So a little bit about myself, Angel Figueroa. I'm a senior manager at Accenture. Been in the Salesforce ecosystem for, I want to say, about 10 years now, and it's been an amazing journey. I'll cover, some of the background as to when I got to start the journey for CTA and how I went through that. So when I started the journey, obviously I started like probably most of you that are considering getting my admin certification, and back then the Force.com, I forgot the name of that certification, but the developer certification back then, and eventually, which eventually became the
Dev 401. By the way, it was Dev 401.
That was it. Yeah. So I started with that, and it was great because I really started getting into the ecosystem. But when I heard about the whole certified technical architect at the beginning of the program, there really wasn't a lot of the organization or a lot of the support structure around these domain certifications. So when the domain certifications came around, that really, lit a fire under me per se, because I was like, okay, this is something that I feel is achievable now. So I started my journey, and I started my journey by getting the domain certs that we all have to get now. The numbers here is the order that I actually achieved those certifications in. Something interesting that I chose to do personally, which is I left Platform Developer 1 for the very end. And the reason I did that is because that's the unifying certification across both. I didn't want to get application architect and then take a break, or get system architect and then take a break. So my thought was, well, you know what? If you can't get both, you get none. And that was a motivating factor for me. Again, we're all different, but that was something that I chose to do. So, it's great. So now you have application architect and system architect. I got these way back in 2017 was when I finished both of these. Really helped what I did day in and day out, because I was more in a leadership role at the company I was with there. So it really helped open up my knowledge of Salesforce as I was studying for these. Something really important: don't study them just for studying them to hit a checkbox to say, oh, I passed that. Really use these as a solid learning experience as you're going through this journey. but once you get to domain
And
architecture,
really quick, I want to emphasize that because you're going to use those every single day. Like there is not a day that goes by that I'm still not using everything from those domain certs. Yeah. And I use them even more now that I've taken the certifications and I've started looking at architecture in a totally different way. Yeah.
you
So
really,
really emphasizing it.
yeah, no, totally agree. You really do, because think of sharing and visibility, data architecture, when you're talking about large data volumes and how to design your data model. These things that even if as developers, even as admins, these are things that you need to be thinking about. And unfortunately, like the certified admin and platform app builder, don't give you as much depth in that. So, these certifications really will guide you or help you look at the broader picture of what you're trying to do, either as a developer, as an admin, whatever responsibilities you have in your org. They truly will help. But then what happens when you reach domain architect? You've got these two, application architect, system architect, you've got these two great certifications. What's next? Am I ready to take the technical architect board? And the reality is no. There's a lot of experience that you really need before you get to the board. And for me, I started doing the trail mixes, around the architect journey, going a little bit deeper into that. I went to my employer, and I actually asked them, hey, will you guys support me on this? And unfortunately, where I was at the time, they weren't a technology company. Salesforce was just one of the tools that were in the IT repertoire, to support the business. So for them, it wasn't important for them to have a CTA on staff or to support me there. So I was kind of studying for CTA, but I didn't really have a solid plan, and when you don't have, these solid plans, you're really not going to get there. It's like if I want to get from, Fort Lauderdale to New York, and I know it's up north, but if I just start meandering my way there, I might never get there, right? So really having the support structure around that was really important. So, but I kept studying. I never gave up. And then a recruiter called at one point, and it was from Accenture. And the thing that really piqued my interest, and with Accenture and probably some of these larger SIs, is that they have a CTA prep program, CTA Elevate, where there's a structured program, there's mentorship, there's not only that, but there's the real world experience of being able to go into an org that has tens of thousands of users and that is dealing with large data volumes and has multiple middleware layer or solutions and is connecting with multiple legacy systems. All this, large customer communities, all this that I could get access to build that experience, because really important for you to continue to build your experience, because in the board, when you get these scenarios, it could be so broad that you really need to have that broad experience across the board. And these judges, they are CTAs. They are, been doing implementations and solutioning in really large orgs. So their questions can be really pointed and, challenge how much you really know about the platform. So obviously I joined Accenture, as I told you from the beginning, and then I started my journey there. I did CTA 601, the prep course, created my personal action plan as to what I wanted to, what I found were the areas that I needed to learn some more. So I'll dig into that a little bit more in a little bit. But from a journey standpoint, December 2020 was when I got my board date, and it was for March 2021. During that span of 3-4 months, I was just heads down studying. I was doing mocks, at least 2 every week. I was, really fine tuning everything that I had been studying and preparing for, because this was crunch time. So the board came along and I was beyond nervous. I mean, it was probably one of the most stressful I'll take that back. It was the most stressful day that I can remember in my entire life. And, I thought I did okay. The results were okay. I had a 2-section retake. So I needed to retake data and integration. For those of you that aren't familiar with the retakes, you are able to take the 7-section board, and if you miss up to 2, they will let you just retake those 2. Anything beyond that, you have to retake the entire board. So come July, I had a date for July to do my 2-section retake around data and integration. And I thought I did the best that I could to prepare, but honestly, it wasn't. I totally failed that. I knew I had failed it miserably at the end of the retake. And at that point, it was, this is why you have that little rocket ship with the crash and burn in the bottom. At that point, it was personally a bit of a low point for me. I remember having the conversation with my wife. Hey, you know what? I'm good at what I do. I'm people, appreciate me. They value my input because I know, my job and I know what I'm doing. I don't really need to be a CTA. I mean, that's nice. That's a nice certification, but I don't really need to do that. My wife turns to me and she's like, I've heard you talk to your other colleagues. And she's like, you have always encouraged them that why would you let all this study time, all this investment in what you're doing to get ready for the CTA stop you with any setback? You need to keep going. You can't let that go to waste. And she was totally right, because I remember those conversations with some of my other, the other guys on the CTA journey that I've talked to. If you've made this investment, right? Megan, did you want to?
I was going to jump in, and I was going to say, as one of your colleagues, I absolutely have to say we absolutely value your opinion, and you've been such an amazing help and resource. I have truly appreciated getting to know you and getting your help on the team. You've been just fantabulous. So yes, your wife gave you the right advice there. So yay!
Awesome. But that's true, right? I mean, you're investing all this time, you're investing all this effort, you're studying, you're using personal time, weekend time to do all this. Why would you let it go to waste? If you say, well, I'm going to stop and I'm going to pick it up in a year, honestly, you have to restart over. This is not something that is muscle memory, that is just going to stay there if you let it, if you let it go away. You will have to start over. So, I really, got my mindset together, really made the commitment that I am going to see this through. I am going to keep going, even if I have to retake it multiple times. I know what I'm doing. It's just a matter of tweaking a little bit and then moving forward. So now in September, I had to do the architect evaluation. That's something new, where you have a mini scenario, and you get to present it to one CTA judge, and they're kind of looking to see, are you ready for the board in the next 3 to 6 months, I think is the criteria that they're looking for. And if you are, then they give you a pass, and then Suzanne or the CTA team the CTA board team will give you a date sometime in the future. That to me was highly valuable. I was honestly nervous at first that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is another board and this is going to be difficult. It was difficult, but it was great because not only was the judge asking me questions to justify my solution, but at the end, I got to interact with the judge. And this is a judge that actually does the full board. So I was able to talk to him and ask him some questions about some of his feedback and some of my experience. And it was, to me, invaluable. Now, they're not going to tell you the answers or the secrets, but at least the approach and the expectations for each of these section areas that you're able to talk about was invaluable. And I had my review board then set for November. So a few months later, so feverishly getting ready for that review board, doing everything. And November 6th came around. November 15th came around. And I thought I did great. I was definitely a lot more at ease from when I did the board in March, but I thought I did phenomenal. And the reality is they didn't think so. They gave me another 2-section retake. Now, the good news is it wasn't the same 2 sections from before. The bad news is I still had a 2-section retake. So this time it was governance, which was interesting, and solutioning. So really just took it as, well, we're just going to keep going, and really studied, continued to study, continued to focus on those areas, went, a bit deeper, because, when you do have those either 1 or 2 section retakes, you do need to go a little bit deeper than you normally would have time to on a regular review board. And from the beginning of the year in January to February 6th, which was when I had my board date, I literally was doing a mock a day, whether I had to present it or not. And I was just doing that to make sure that I had the right mindset in my timing, solutioning, and the artifacts that I was going to create. And I'll give you an example of some of the artifacts in a few slides. But February 22nd, I passed, and super excited about that. When I got the news, it was a little surreal for me. I think my wife was much more excited than I was, but it settles in, and then you just start feeling comfortable with saying, "Hi, my name is Angel Figueroa, and I'm a CTA." And it's been really great. I'll take a quick pause. I know we're gonna have Q&A at the end, but any Megan, Paul, or anybody?
I have so many questions.
You want to say
Really
them for
quick,
the
I'm
end, or
just-
you want to go now?
I'll do a really fast interjection. I remember when you passed, I got told like right away when John found out, and it was so exciting. Like, oh my gosh, I wanted to ping you right away, but I didn't know you that well yet. And I was like, I want to tell him congratulations. I want to get all of his secrets. Like, how did he do it? I want to know what to do next. But yeah, I got a ton of questions for the end about like next steps. How do we get ready? What do we do to prepare? Like, what would you recommend for, based on where people are at? Yeah. So sorry, but I'll leave that for the end, because this journey is fantastic. And I'm really curious about the retake. So you mentioned that it's a little bit more, when you do the retake sections. So, but what is it? What is the retake actually like? Is it like going in and doing like just the CTA exam, except on just those sections? Or
Yeah,
are there the other sections, but you just focus on those 2 sections? Or
that's a great question. By all means, your goal should be to pass the board and not have any retakes, because so the 2-section retake, which is the ones that I had to do twice on 2 different sections, you're basically given the full scenario.
okay.
So you're given the 10 to 15 page scenarios that are out there. And instead of having 3 hours to solve, you only have 1.5 hours.
Oh, geez.
So, yes. So you have to read the scenario and pull out the sections that pertain to you. And you might think, well, my second retake was solutioning and development lifecycle. And you might think, well, development lifecycle is easy. It's that one section at the end of the scenario usually, right? Well, yes and no, because in software development lifecycle, you also have to outline what your risks are. So your risks can be spread out through the entire scenario. So you still need to read, and in most of these 2-section retakes, you still need to read through the entire scenario, but now you have 90 minutes. And in those 90 minutes, not only do you have to read, but you have to solution. So honestly, the 2-section retake to me, in a way, is harder than the whole review board.
It is really good to know that they give you the full thing and you got to pick it out versus them giving
Yeah.
you a specialized like exam or doc. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you have the 1-section retake, that I don't want to say it's easier, but that's more focused, because they do have specific 1-section exams. And I don't know how long they are or anything like that, since I never got to experience that. But if you have a 1-section retake and it's on integration, then you're going to get a more focused scenario that for that, because they do have those 1-section retakes. But for the 2, it's really difficult to them to have a combination of every single possible 2 sections that could happen. So that's why they give you the full scenario. So yeah, that's try to avoid it. Whatever you do, pass it the first time. Don't be like Angel.
No, that's really helpful. I actually had somebody that was just asking me about the 2-section retake last week, and I had no idea what to say. So I'm gonna just direct them over to you. Yeah.
Send them over. I have a few folks that, and I think you connected me with, the gentleman from Germany, Michael, right? I think was his name.
Correct. Yeah, Michael. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So he's got a 2-section retake, and I'm giving him some coaching ideas on there because,
Thank you, by the way.
my pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah. It is a bit of a challenge, and it is a little bit nerve-wracking. So it's really important to, to talk to, and there's plenty of us, Jitendra Zha, Waruna, I think Charlie only had a 1-section retake, but there's been plenty of us that have had 2-section retakes to go through. So yeah, there's a lot of us that can help out.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Oh.
All right, go ahead. Sorry.
All right, so let's go. So I love this quote, and I've put it here because you know what? Life, and when we're doing these hard things, it's not always linear. There's failures. There's bound to be failures, and I love this quote when I ran into it, and I actually kept it close to me because look, sometimes it's learning from those failures. If everything's going great, it's awesome. But when you have your setbacks, use them as a learning experience. If it was easy to be a CTA, everyone would be a CTA. I've told my kids that when they were, going through school. If it was easy to be a doctor, everyone would be a doctor. If it was easy to be an attorney, everyone would be an attorney. It's hard. This stuff's really hard. And that's what makes it valuable. So learn from those failures, learn from those setbacks, and then just build upon that. So, let's go over some of that background of what I did to prepare. The very first thing is your commitment to being on the journey. As I mentioned initially, yes, if you would ask me in 2017 or 2016 or, around that time, hey, what's your goal? Oh, I'm going to be a CTA. But there was really nothing behind it. There wasn't that commitment and that structure to get me through. So really making the commitment, if you have a family, making sure that, they understand what it entails. I remember having the conversation with my wife and saying, look, this is what it's going to take. And, I need personal time to do this study. And she was on board. Make sure you get connected. There's some of the study groups underneath here. I'll talk about them in a second. And look wherever you are. Does your company have a corporate program? I mentioned Accenture CTA Elevate. To me, that was a huge catalyst in helping me get here. Working with other CTAs at the firm, working with other candidates like myself that were on this journey and had made that commitment. Look to see if your company has a program that you can get plugged into, and then get plugged into your Architect Trailblazers. There's a lot of great content there, really a lot of useful information that you're going to use throughout the journey in getting ready for the board. Apex Hours has some incredibly amazing video content and presentations from current and aspiring CTAs. And obviously the study groups. Megan has one that's awesome. The link is here. I put it in bit.ly just because the link gets really long when you try to put it on the slide. Melissa has another group that is phenomenal. And then obviously Ladies Be Architect. And you probably know many of these.
And really quick,
yeah.
Ohana Slack is connected to the Melissa Shepard Architect Study Slack too. So we've got interchanging channels. We just did Slack Connect. Yeah.
Oh, you did? Awesome.
You can get it all in one spot. Yep.
Awesome. I didn't know you guys did that. That's amazing. All right, cool. So there you go. Just make sure you get connected. There's a lot of great folks on the journey. There's other CTAs that are still involved to help out. One of the challenges when you do become a CTA is your time gets pulled in some other directions, but it's really important to, help the community. Think about when you were going through the journey and help others in that journey. So one of the biggest things as I was going through the journey is identifying my blind spots. What were those areas that I thought I knew, but I really didn't? The CTA 601 workshop is great because it gives you the format of the board, what you're expected to present on. It really breaks down the exam guide. Yeah, and I think it's really important for anyone to do. And then setting up those study plans and goals. And for me, the eye opener was after I did CTA 601 and I created my goals and my action plan, was doing the mock boards with those scenarios that are out there in the public right now and solutioning them and presenting them. Once I really started doing that, I really started identifying some areas that I'm not as strong as I thought I was. Communities. Back then when I started this journey, I thought I knew communities pretty well because I had stood up a few and, and deployed them and everything, but I really didn't know it to the level that I needed to know it. I didn't know a lot of the intricacies on some of the licensing or the partner, functionality, the partner portal functionality, things like that. So that was an area that I worked towards getting on a project that had a big community implementation so that I could start getting more of that hands-on experience. Now, I couldn't always get on a project. So if I couldn't get on a project, then I would do some hands-on on my own, but the hands-on is really important. And that helped me identify those blind spots so that I could go after them and either reach out to, others that are studying this area or get on projects that I could get deeper into that. The other part as you go through this journey is make sure you have balance. I remember at the beginning, I was just so focused on this. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and my mind was trying to solve a scenario in the middle of the night. And I'm like, all right, this is not good because I need to be able to get some rest. So make sure you have a good balance of that study time, but your mindfulness, make sure you get some exercise, eat well, and get rest, because it does you no good if you overstress yourself and you're not ready for really learning and having that energy that you need to make it to the board and be successful at the board. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So you need to make sure that you take care of yourself as you're going through all this. So some stats, because we all love stats. It took me over 1,000 hours, so over a year of study. Again, everyone's different. And this is, by the way, this is a year of study. Once I made that, I want to do this. I did over 50 mocks, probably way over 50 mocks. That's the only ones that I was able to count. But you know what? My confidence has increased twofold, if not more. I feel so much more comfortable when I'm talking to not only the developers, which I always felt comfortable with in my projects, but also when I need to talk to the VPs or the CIOs or the CTOs. It's just the amount of knowledge that you gain throughout this journey is amazing. And my favorite stat is the reduction of 25% of my household chores, which unfortunately my wife is asking me to do more stuff in the house around this.
That's my favorite stat. I love that one. How did I get that stat? I live alone. I don't know if that's going to work.
Might not work if you live alone. Yeah, it might not. But anyway, that's, you definitely, once you set that goal, it's something that's achievable. Everyone's different. Everyone's journey is different. I've heard of some folks with just like around 500 hours because of the depth of their experience. One of the CTAs that was my coaches, I mean, he did a handful of mocks, and with his experience, he aced it. First shot, done. So everyone's different. I needed a lot more help. So presentation, just to talk about it high level, and I'll show you some of my artifacts just so you can get an idea. You need to find your own style, right? This is what worked for me. So for the full board, 3 hours to solve, you get a 15-minute break between hour 2 and 3, 45-minute presentation, and my favorite, 40 minutes of being grilled by your CTA judges, which can be very nerve-wracking. But my layout of my presentation is, I had the introduction. You want to just cover that high level. You don't need to really go deep in there. They know about that. Cover your assumptions. Make sure you've got your org strategy, single org, multi-org. Make sure you're justifying all this, right? So it's not just saying, I have a single org and you keep moving. No, I have a single org or I have multi-orgs because of these requirements, because of these constraints, because X, Y, and Z. So make sure that as you're doing all this and you're presenting, you're given the thought process of why you decided, oh, I'm going to use a Lightning Web Component here. Well, why? Why didn't you use a flow? Why didn't you use declarative? Make sure you articulate why you're making these choices as you're going through the presentation. And again, you guys can read this. I really dislike when people read slides to me, but really making sure that when you're looking at your data model, you're identifying the key objects, or you need to have all your objects. You need to have a complete object model, but where is the data in your requirements going to reside? Who owns these records? How are you going to share this records? What's the cardinality that you have between the objects? So really important to make sure that you have a holistic picture of everything that you're doing and why you're doing it. Be able to explain it and articulate it very quickly. One of the great pieces of advice that I got from that architect review was be clear and concise. And then I just replay that in my mind all the time. Be clear and concise. Unfortunately, I get to be a little wordy at times, and that was one of the things I really needed to work on, being clear and concise. So these are some of my artifacts. This is my system landscape on the left. This is, I believe, for greenhouse recycling. I'm not saying this is right. This is an example of one of the mocks that I did. And I fell in love with those friction pens. And I have it in my slide because I love these. These are erasable. So for me, which I love to make mistakes, they came in super handy, and they come in all these cool colors. So I know that, like from Tamim's book and everything, there's a lot of people that really like to create an integration slide or a table with all the integrations. I never did that. I actually tried doing that, and it really messed up my timing. So for me is I use the colors, and as you can see there in my my system landscape, I number them, and then I use the colors to be able to highlight which integration I'm talking about when I go through my solutioning. So this is just my style. Everyone's different. I know a lot of people that use the integration table, and you just have to pick what's more comfortable for you. I'm a slow reader, so I try to pick and choose where I'm going to use my time the best. And I know I can draw pretty fast because I've been drawing diagrams for maybe 20 years of my life. So felt comfortable doing something like this. My object model on the right, normally I'll tell a funny story about this one, which is why I chose a picture of this. Normally I'll use the colored pens to distinguish between my standard and custom objects. But in this scenario, when I got to the end, I realized, oh my gosh, I drew everything in black ink. How am I going to highlight the, which are custom, which are external? And then I thought of it, oh, I'll just get a highlighter, and I got my green highlighter and my pink highlighter, and I did this real quick. So again, make sure you can, have your contingency plans around these things to make sure that if something like this happens, you're like, all right, I'm just going to highlight, in green, highlight the legend, and I'm done. So I don't think this was a great object model, but it was an object model nonetheless.
Did you get to bring in your own writing materials or writing utensils?
Yes. So for the virtual board, it's different than the in-person one. I think the in-person one, they give you everything. So, which I believe they're going to start those soon. I heard something about that, but I'm not sure what the timing is. But for the virtual board, you get to bring your own paper, and you get to bring your own pens. I think they recommend not to use pencils. And I think that's partially because when you take the picture, they might not come out as well. So for me, the friction pens, which I can erase, were kind of a big deal. But yeah, you've got to have your own paper and you got to have your own pens.
So question. So you mentioned the fact that, you do your data model, you do your sharing. We all know that in real life projects, clients ask us to do some really crazy stuff that we can't talk them out of. It's pretty out there. When you're doing your exam, do they pretty much follow at least Salesforce standard law, or will you get that ridiculous type stuff clients ask you to do?
That's a great question. You will get some quirky requirements at times, or some income, just like the mock exams. If you've been going through the mock exams, especially some of the third-party ones, they have huge gaps in some of the functionality or in some of the requirements that you have to make assumptions for, and you need to make sure that you make those assumptions there. So try to make logical assumptions that will help you solution it without getting overly complicated. I have been a judge on some mocks where I've seen some object models that are just way overly complicated.
Yeah.
And, I think at least from my experience, be careful doing that.
Yeah.
Because that really just, as
complicates your life. It's just like it doesn't build.
It complicates you, right? It really complicates you from a solutioning standpoint, because then they're going to be trying to figure out, what are you trying to do here? Why do you have 74 custom objects? What's this?
Why'd you back yourself into a corner? Yeah.
Right. And then you are going to hurt yourself, because then you're going to take so much focus from a Q&A standpoint to that you might not pass, because you took the judge's time so much into this one area. Remember, they're human just like us. They're trying to understand everything that you're giving them in 45 minutes and trying to ask the right questions to find out if you really know this so that you can pass. But if you really give them some red herring or some rabbit hole that they're going to go into, and they're going to spend 25, 30 minutes of those precious 45 minutes, you're not going to give them enough time to ask you about your integrations or about your security or about all these things. So, this is a great question, because don't overcomplicate this. Okay. I know of someone that went to the board, which to me is probably the smartest, or one of the smartest architects I ever met. And he didn't pass it. And again, I don't know what scenario or anything that he had, but when we were doing mocks, and I was trying to help him with this, his solutions were overly complex.
Yeah. Okay.
That's not going to help you. They want to make sure that you can solution this. They want to make sure that you're doing the right things, because anyone, and we've seen this in real life, anyone can overcomplicate a data model. I'm sure that all of us as architects or aspiring architects have seen this, that you go into a client or you go into an org and they rebuilt cases, and you're
right.
saying,
I was gonna ask about context, making a second people object or something like that. They're not going to make us do that, or like misconstrue accounts. All of a sudden, be your product that they have. It's an asset. Yeah.
I went into a client that they built their own custom case routing engine.
I just had one where they did leads their own custom way with MuleSoft. Yep. And it's just like, they're not going to throw that kind of weird stuff at us, are they?
well, I mean, they might not, but if you find one requirement that you're thinking, oh, the only way I'm going to do this is if I recreate the wheel, and you do that, you're going to dig yourself a hole. I'm not saying that that's not potentially it, because, it depends on the scenario, but I would be surprised if you can make a valid use case on why you need to rebuild the lead engine or the case assignment engine, right?
Because they want us to use the actual platform properly, right? That's their big goal, is to properly use Salesforce. Even if we get creative, they just don't want us to to like bastardize the whole thing.
Oh yeah, you want to be creative. I mean, you're going to need to be creative as you go through this, but just think about that. This goes back to the build versus buy versus, declarative versus programmatic, right? Can you do this with an app exchange tool? Like one of my favorites is, there's in one of the mock scenarios, one of the ones that are out there is they want to do round robin lead assignment. Are you going to rebuild the lead assignment engine? Or are you going to say, I am going to use this app exchange tool, which honestly, I forgot the name of it now, but there's an app exchange tool out there that provides round robin lead assignment.
That's what it's really called, round robin lead assignment.
It's
round robin lead assignment. Yeah.
So, but you've got to know these things, right? You've got to really think outside the box, where you might think, oh, I'm going to rebuild the lead assignment process, and that might not be optimal. So yeah, you really need to think. You really need to think through these, right? So things like data migration. What's your DevOps strategy? Being able to not draw something that looks like it's stock, right?
Yeah.
Draw something that ties back to what your requirements are, what you're trying to solve. Because if you just give them a generic center of excellence diagram, and which is probably why I failed the
dev upside.
The dev lifecycle one.
Yeah.
And I don't remember if it was too generic or something, but there was something there that they felt was just not addressing the requirements in the scenario. So, make sure that you're tying this back, whatever your artifact is, you're tying it back to what you're trying to address in that scenario. That's the most important thing. If you just have, stock stuff and generic stuff like large data volumes, I'm going to use skinny tables and standard indexes. Well, why? And what are you going to do when you do reach large data volumes? What's your archive strategy? How are you going to make that data available later on? All these things that you really need to talk through, and not just, put and supply the canned answers.
Awesome. And then I've heard about people that kind of try to make sure that the stuff they know the best, they kind of try to wait and do that for the questions instead of explaining it in the beginning. Is that what, first of all, why? And then is that like a legitimate path for doing your board?
So
so that they have the panel ask them about the things they know. That's the area that they stay the lightest on.
So, I've heard so many strategies, I'll call them strategies, from people about, leaving these honeypots and going a little bit light on one area that you really know, so that they focus on, but you run the risk of them spending, again, so much time in that area that, sure, you show that you're an expert in integration because you went really light, and now you go really deep and you wow them. But honestly, you probably lost 5 minutes or whatever amount of time that they might have more questions in another area that they didn't quite get in your solution. So, if you want,
that's what I thought.
Yeah, if you want to roll the dice on that, sure. I mean, I've talked to plenty of people that have thought that, but I always stayed away from it because I'm like, well, what if I didn't get my security right, or I missed something in security, and I'm focusing so much in this one area that I know really deep? I might hurt myself in that process. So I never followed that line of thinking. I don't know if anyone else has or is willing to say that they have, but I never wanted to mess with any kind of strategy like that. I had my own strategies on how I was building my artifacts and the order I did things. I had a 3x5 card right here under my monitor of that sequence for the longest, so that during the day I can glance at it and see it. Obviously, you can't have any reference material, anything around you when you do the board. As a matter of fact, right before you start the board, you need a third or a second camera behind you, or at least one that you can move back and in front. And they're looking at your hands and your monitor the entire time that you're doing your board. And before you start your board, they actually have you, show them the room and show them your work area. And you're really only allowed to have those pens and that paper. Anything else around you, needs to go away. So you can't have little cheat sheets or anything like that that will help you. But I had that 3x5 card, for probably a year in front of me with the sequence and some quick notes that I would glance at it and just, make sure that I do some of that repetitive learning. So all great questions. So, going back to the resources, make sure that you look at everything that you have out there. Your OAuth flows, one of my favorites is Cloud Sundial. Lawrence Newcomb has created such an extensive collection of the identity flows. The bit.ly link on the right is for a playlist. He did a series for Apex Hours that was phenomenal, and he broke down all the identity flows in probably the most incredible detail. So really important, knowing your limits. So making sure that if you're suggesting something, that you've got your limits, considered. So like web to lead 500 max per day. Make sure that you do some math there to make sure you don't exceed those limits. The trail mixes, the architects, the mock exams, there's plenty out there from Andrew Hart and Melissa's group. There's some of the ones that are that some in the community have created. The Salesforce Architect Trailblazer group has some of the retired exams that that everyone uses, and those are really good to start practicing. And then obviously the two books, Tamim's book on, how to become a Salesforce certified technical architect, and the Salesforce Architects book. By the way, in Tamim's book, I love the book. I got a lot of insight from the book, but make sure you follow your style. As I mentioned with that integration table, make sure you follow your style in how you want to present, how you feel comfortable presenting. It's okay to try, everything verbatim the way that he has it in the book, but you're going to need to follow your style on what's normal and natural for you, because we're all different. And again, from seeing so many different mocks throughout the last year and a half, I really have seen so many different ways that you can present the scenario and it flows and it's presented concisely and in a way that makes sense, that the judges can consume. Because you gotta put your mind in the side of the judge, that he's listening to this from you. And if you come up with some unique way of presenting, it needs to make sure that it flows and it doesn't really throw them off.
And really quick, I actually talked to our lovely Miss Melissa Shepard, who's here, about that probably a couple of months ago. And I started doing my projects with like a template that I use for how I present some of my security stuff and my identity stuff, my integration stuff. So that I kind of got into the same pattern for how I do my mocks. It's not exactly how I do my mocks, but at least that way I kind of speak about things in the same order, so that I'll be in the habit of speaking in the same order. Yeah.
Totally. So one of the things, it's going to maybe sound odd, but one of the things that I would do is during breaks during the day, I would, bring up, back the first time I took it, I could use still PowerPoint. Now you've got to use Google. So I would bring up Google Slides or PowerPoint, and then I would turn on my timer and time how fast I could get my shell of slides done. Again, I had that little 3x5, card, but I also practiced when the clock would start, I'd create my shell of slides. And what that did for me is it helped me make sure I didn't miss a section that I needed to have an artifact or something on. So again, we're all different, but I think I got to the point where I could create that shell in less than a minute. So
So
again,
that's another question I have. The speed of speaking. So I had somebody that had done a mock, and I was one of the judges for their mock that was sitting there listening. The Monday night mocks. Yeah. So it was, and they spoke so fast, I could not understand a darn word they said because they were trying to get their time in. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm a fast talker naturally. So one thing I'm always trying to do is slow down. And so I just, how fast should you be talking on these? Like, because I didn't understand a word until the Q&A. Yeah.
That's another awesome question, Megan. And as fast as you can clearly articulate. One of my favorite mocks, if you're part of Melissa's study Slack group, Melissa has a mock that she recorded and put up there right before she went up for the board, and it's Global Adventure Tours. And I think it was around September when she did this, because I think her board was in October. Global Adventure Tours. She talks so fast, but you know what? She is completely clear and articulate. So I would say you want to talk fast. Talking slow, again, everyone has their own style, but you've got so much content to fit in 45 minutes that you do need to speed up in how you're talking. But you need to make sure that you're still clear, that they can understand you. So it really depends on your ability to talk fast and clear.
So speed talking, for the sake of speed talking, to talk fast, if they can't understand you, it's just a waste of time.
It totally is. You might as well, just wing it and talk about whatever, because if they're not understanding you, that means that they've got even more questions just to get clarity on, hey, go back to this integration. What was that integration again? Or, what was that solution about? Because if you're just trying to get through it so fast and it's not comprehensible, it's not going to help you, and it's not going to help them. It's going to be tough for them to.
And that's exactly how the Q&A went. Was I had to ask about every single thing because I just couldn't figure out what he was saying. And then what about handwriting? I know that not all of us are the best handwriting. I was always told in school how I write like a doctor. So I've tried to work on my block print in capital letters because I never mastered the cursive. Yeah, are they pretty good at decoding handwriting?
So, some of this, if you look at some of this, it's relatively legible. Some I wrote faster, and you can probably tell the ones that I wrote faster than the ones I wrote slower. But you want it to be legible, right? So, you don't want it to be a scribble that,
you need to translate every word.
Yeah. This is my own custom shorthand, and I will be here to translate for you. But it doesn't have to be perfect, right? It just needs to be somewhat legible, that they can figure out that this is dedupe, and that's and then that's master, so it needs to be somewhat legible. Yeah.
By the way, my own custom shorthand. Now you're speaking my project notes. There we go. They're all in my own custom shorthand.
Yeah, and that's great for projects and things like that. I'm sure we all.
But you can't present with it. You can't show it to a client. You can't show it to your team. That's all for you. Yeah.
Think about perfect what you just said. Think about this being presented to your client, right? Yeah. Think about what you're doing here. You have to present it to your CIO, CTO, whoever it is that's a technical person, and you're trying to tell them, hey, based on all these requirements that you gave me, this is my recommendation. This is how I think we should do it. That's the intent of the scenario. The intent of the scenario is that you're presenting to this company, this fictional company that they made up, on how they can achieve their goals, their requirements. So it's really important to have that mindset. I'm going to present to, greenhouse recycling, on how they can address all these requirements and some of their challenges.
And that's a great question. So do you talk to them like they are the client, or do you talk to them like they're the architect panel?
Oh, I probably flipped back and forth between that.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think that I was like so focused, honed in. You know, I've done mocks when some of my judges have been like, well, as XYZ company, we're really concerned about budget. What would you do here? They could do that. They totally could do that. But I flipped back and forth between that. I don't think I had a strict, like a strict approach there.
Good to know. Thank you. Sorry for all the questions, by the way.
No, by all means. I mean, I'm sure everyone has plenty of questions there, so we can, you know, let me wrap up so we can have plenty of time. Really, for me, like I mentioned throughout, it's really giving back. So in Accenture, I'm one of the mentors now in the CTA Elevate program, which I'm super excited about the candidates that we have. You know, and even outside of Accenture, you know, supporting, you know, others on that journey to CTA. You know, it's something that's really important to me because I know how tough it is. So making sure that, you know, I connect there, connect with others in Melissa's group and Megan and with Paul. I'm also the co-leader of the Fort Lauderdale developer group. If you're ever down in the Fort Lauderdale area, let us know. Love to have you, you know, visit one of our developer group meetings. And then if you're in the journey or you're thinking of doing the journey, you know, like I mentioned, find out if your company has an internal program. I think that is really helpful. Make sure you find projects that will help you grow in that area, because doing the same thing all the time is I don't want to say it's bad, but it probably won't give you the level of experience that you need to have that broad level of knowledge across all the domains throughout the scenario. And then just getting involved in the Slack groups and others that are in the journey, you know, whether it's with a study group or just being part of the Slack groups in some of these other groups that we have available. You know, just get involved. You know, find others that are on the journey, and then, you know, work your way there. Create a plan. Don't just kind of like, yeah, I'm studying. Because it's going to be harder without that plan and without that structure. And that was it. The obligatory thank you slide. Thanks for having me, Megan and Paul. Really appreciate it. And let's get into some Q&A.
Yeah, and really quick, I want to give one shout out to Melissa. Her group is not just a Slack group. They also meet 4 times a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Plus, like this god awful 7 a.m. Pacific Sunday morning time, which I'm so sorry, Melissa. That's just too early for me. But yeah, and so it's a call and it's a Slack workspace. So fabulous opportunity there to connect with people and to get your questions answered and for mocks. Yeah. And we have loved having you, Angel. Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me. This has been great. So how do you want to handle the questions, or do we unmute people, or
people can just unmute themselves? Feel free to ask away. One question I have though is, so I've heard that they really stick to like sales, service, and experience cloud. Are they do they really branch out into other clouds? I know I just did this big CPQ project. So I learned a bunch of, I sat there with my books because it's been 8 years since I did CPQ. Now I got a bunch of CPQ under my belt, and they just took my exam too. So I'm like all CPQified. Is that useless knowledge for my CTA or what?
Not at all. Not at all. Okay. You know, if the scenario warrants it, and you have the knowledge for it, then by all means, that's, you know, these just the same way as app exchange tools like Chargent or something like that. If you have something that has the complexity of a CPQ or a field service lightning and you feel comfortable and you know it, it's on the table. My only caveat to that is make sure that you can explain it.
Yeah.
If you go into detail, if it's part of your object model that you're calling the key objects there, and be careful that if it's just one requirement, here's my stance on like CPQ. If it's just one requirement and you're bringing in CPQ,
that's too much.
Yeah. If it's one requirement, and you can talk through, you can say, look, I thought of CPQ for this one requirement, but I felt that this was too big. So my recommendation is we're going to build this, you know, in you know, an Apex or LWC or whatever it is. But giving them the the explanation that you thought of it and why you decided not to, that adds a lot of weight as to how you're justifying. Remember, because you want to justify this. You just don't want to say CPQ, and then they're going to be like, great, you recommended CPQ, but can you tell us about CPQ? Where are the objects for CPQ? Why don't I see the objects for CPQ in your data model? So, you know,
and I've heard that not all the judges have worked with all the different clouds, you know, extensively. So you may end up having to go in and explain some of it too, and that could take away from your Q&A time.
It could. Remember, the judges have varied experience, just like you.
Yeah.
So you might get a judge that is very deep in CPQ. So you bring in CPQ, you might open up a lot of questions there. You might get lucky and maybe the judge is not deep in CPQ, and you might just get high level. And but yeah,
or they're not deep and they ask a million questions because they're not deep. Yeah.
Or that, because they want to get all your responses because they're going to double check. Remember, they have the luxury of double checking you. So if it's an area that they're not familiar with, and I'm just going to write down all the notes and everything that they said, and then I'm going to go confirm.
Do they record you, or is it just their notes?
I don't believe they record you.
Okay.
I don't know 100%, but I don't remember anyone. You sign your NDA.
Yeah.
But I don't remember, and honestly, I'm horrible at that. I did not read the NDA because I just want to be a CTA, so I don't care what you have on here. I'm just going to sign this.
And then Melissa, maybe do you know if they record you? I always get paranoid about recording. Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is.
It's not like you can change it. Yeah. It's just one of those things. But when I'm being recorded, I was like, slow myself down. And like, I think extra hard about stuff. So I'm like, it's documented forever.
That's kind of like the NDA, right? I did peruse through it, but I was like, there's probably nothing in this NDA that is going to prevent me from signing this and taking this board. Okay, I can't talk about the exam. I can't talk about these things. Fine. I'm okay with that.
And how long after your 600 class did your exam get scheduled? Because I'm taking my 600 class this summer. So how long until that do you usually have your exam?
It's all personal. It took me a while. It probably took me like 2 years, a year and a half from when I took it. So I took my, I took the 601 in mid 2019. And I wound up getting scheduled in 20. So yeah, took about a year and a half. But that was because, again, I found the blind spots that I needed to really work at. So, doing the mocks, doing the CTA 601, doing the mocks really helped me solidify or get a better idea of how much time I really needed. So everyone is really different.
So do you feel like getting it? So now that you've had it and you've been a CTA for 6 months now, do you feel, I mean, I know it's an amazing accomplishment and it's a huge badge of honor and pride and status for sure. Has it opened doors for you? Do you feel like the entire cost of the pathway is paying itself back?
Oh yeah, that's a great question, Paul. I'm super happy with the outcomes and the opportunities I've had for that. I internally in Accenture, being able to mentor others, speaking at the North America Salesforce Business Group meeting, getting to go to TDX and sharing, my experience and my journey. This is a pretty similar deck to what I presented there, almost identical. So yeah, wholeheartedly. And when I go into client meetings now, being able to say, hey, I'm a CTA, really, I still need to prove myself. I don't want to say, oh, you don't have to prove yourself because you just said you're a CTA, but they already know that you're at this level rather than, oh, here's a technical architect and is he good or is he not good? I think that question goes away and you're really focusing on not necessarily proving yourself, but proving yourself in a different way that we can start talking about solutioning and not really trying to justify, should Angel be here? I hope that helps, Paul.
And he's gonna go to that awesome CTA summit now, which has like so much cool stuff, right? So jealous.
I was fortunate to get invited to the CTA Summit, which is a one-day event in one of the Salesforce towers, not the big one, the one right next to it in San Francisco. But it was great because it's all your other fellow CTAs, and obviously they share with you things under NDA that I can't talk about here, but it's amazing. I mean, it's just really cool to be part of something special like that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I don't want the exam as much as I want to be in the club.
Right.
I just like talking to CTAs. I don't really care.
But you gotta go
thank
through
you. I
the
appreciate it.
exam. You gotta
Yep.
go through that. Yeah.
Thank
I'm
you.
even excited for the exam at this point. Like, I want to take the test. I was there with Jorky to say something. I'm excited to take a test. But no, it's at that point where it's just, I don't know, for me, it's been something I've been dying to do for so long that, you know, getting all this great info from you, Angel, Melissa, all the other CTAs out there that I've been harassing and following online and asking a million questions to, that, you know, it's just got me even more excited to be doing this. And I don't know, you guys always build up my energy every time you talk about it. Yeah.
You know, anyone that's interested, I mean, it's amazing. It's one of those things that when you're going through and putting in all the time and putting in all the study and, you know, maybe telling your friends, oh, I can't get together because I have to study, or I can't get together because I have the study group, or there's this, you know, meeting that I need to be a part of. It's tough when you're going through it. It's not easy, but like I said, it's meant that way because it's highly valued. If everyone would be able to just become a CTA,
Everybody would do it.
everyone would do it. Why not?
And,
You know?
and we've got a question in the chat from Orlando. How many years of experience with Salesforce is necessary before the journey to CTA? Thanks.
That's a great question. It really varies, right? And it varies depending on your experience. So for me, when I was in industry, you know, in corporate America, I got a lot of experience around that industry and around our implementation or their implementation of Salesforce. And my knowledge was really based in that area. But things like, you know, learning about different identity flows, learning about large data volumes, learning about CPQ, field service lightning, communities, partner portal, I was never going to get that there. So if you're in a company or a consulting company SI where you get to get exposed to all this, your amount of time is going to be shorter than mine was, because I needed to get out of that into an area or into a company where I would have that broad ability to go into a company that has 10,000 users and a company that has 100,000 users plus millions of community users in their org, or a company that has 37 Salesforce orgs. And how do you manage that, right? So it depends on what you have access to from a learning capability. So it could be a few years, you might be well on your way to that journey, or you might need to look at, you know, what is going to help you get the experience that you need for that next level.
Awesome. And Mike, you had a question.
Hey guys, happy
Mike.
Saturday. First, I want to say, Angel, thanks for taking time out of your Saturdays to share your journey. This is amazing. This is Mike DeRosso out of Cleveland, Ohio. I think I started studying in March, so time's flying by. My question, Angel, you had mentioned that you'd taken the 601 in 2019, and then throughout that journey, did you feel that was a good time to take it? I'm trying to determine how far out from my target date do I want to take that 601.
If you do you have your domain certs already?
Yes, I do.
I would say take it whenever you can, because what that's going to do, it's going to start solidifying what you need to start focusing on from a board standpoint. So the CTA 601, they go through the entire exam guide, you know, bullet point by bullet point, and start breaking down what are those areas that you need to cover for each of these bullet points. For me, it helped out a lot understanding, you know, or starting to understand those areas of gaps that I had. And then in CTA 601, you also get to do a board exam, usually something like greenhouse recycling or something like that. And someone is going to usually present on that. So you'll start getting a better feel for the board and what you need to start preparing for. And for me, I use that also as a catalyst to figure out which areas I needed to study deeper on. Because think about Salesforce. Salesforce is so broad. If you want to learn everything about Salesforce, how long do you think that's going to take you? Probably going to take you more than a year and a half or 2 years, right? So
And really quick, I would be careful though about the timing, because I took mine in 2019 as well, and I've got to retake it for my 601 because it's been so long, and now that they have the new rule. Just so you know, that's why I'm taking it again this summer.
are they
Okay.
asking you to take 601?
Yeah, they're taking me
Yeah.
having me retake it. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I didn't know either. I think it's because they now make it obligatory. And like, yeah. But I don't know why I have to retake it, but a couple of us from the same class are doing it because we never took our CTA exams or went any further. Yeah.
So Mike, for you, I mean, how many years of experience do you have already?
It's about 4 years, and I'm projecting a target date of 18 months out, giving myself plenty of time to make sure that I can get on projects if I don't have experience, things like that you just had mentioned. That takes time to get that.
It does.
So I'm not pushing that target date any sooner. I think 18 months to 24 months is where I'm aiming at. So that's why in my mind that Megan had mentioned, that's almost, you know, a year and a half to 2 years. But yeah, I'm just trying to see if the timing is right.
And the 18 to 24 is for the board, or to be presenting at the board?
Yes, a board review board target date.
Yeah, I mean, if you've got 18 to 24, maybe towards the end of the year, beginning of the year, but just make sure you have that study plan and figure out, you know, if you can get on some of these projects where, you know, hey, I don't really have experience with, you know, large data volumes, you know, what project can I get on? Or I don't have experience with Experience Cloud now. You know, what can I get on? Start creating those goals and that work plan. Because I think that's really important for you to define, rather than just kind of going about it and saying, oh, today I'm studying, you know, external objects, right? Have it something a little bit more defined than that.
Yeah, awesome. Hopefully they don't change the rules on me, right, Megan? Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
Appreciate it.
Anytime, yeah.
And so sorry, I stepped away from my keypad. I was making tea, but no, totally. And really quick, we got another question from Orlando in the chat. So he's asking you, Angel, if you had the opportunity to do again the CTA, what would you change or not in your journey, and why?
So that's a great question.
Right, I love it.
Oh man, you're making me think now. So probably one of the things that I would change is moving to an Accenture or another SI much sooner than I did. That would be the first thing that I would do. And again, you guys heard all the reasons for that. The second thing that I would do is create an action plan earlier than when I actually started creating that action plan. Because like I told you guys, At the beginning, I was just kind of, yeah, I'm going to be a CTA, but I didn't have anything structured. So really creating that action plan earlier rather than when I did, I think I could have probably been a CTA, earlier by probably a year or two than now if I would have had those two things in place.
Okay.
We're
gonna. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I didn't understand the first reason. Excuse me. My connection was not very good. Can you repeat again? Is if you don't mind? Very
Yeah,
thanks.
no, yeah, or Orlando, of course. The first one would have been finding an opportunity, leaving from where I was employed, to another, SI like Accenture that had a CTA Elevate program, right? That would have been the first thing.
Okay, thank you.
Because of the experience that you get across different clients and different technologies. I think that would have been the main thing that I would have done earlier.
Okay, really thanks.
Sure.
I got a question.
Yeah, we've been texting the wrong people, Megan. I sent you the question from Orlando, and you sent me the question for Angel.
No, that was my question. I was putting it out there so I didn't forget. I was dropping it into everyone group. Do you have an example of that plan that you use to get yourself like ready and your agenda plan for your future path that like we could see for like how it was arranged, like what you put into it?
Funny enough, I'm a little bit old school for some of those things. I have to look for it, but it was in a. I still do analog notes. I still love writing on paper.
I'm a pen and paper person too. You should see all my yellow pads. Yeah, I go through them like crazy. Amazon loves dropping them at my door in the 20 packs.
Yeah, so I always had a notebook with all these little things on them, and it was a living list. Whereas I got parts of it taken care of, there were always new areas that would come out. Like a big thing when I first started studying for the journey, event-driven architecture, platform events, things like that weren't really a thing. Back then we were still talking about external outbound messages and things like that. So again, as Salesforce releases these new features, you need to make sure you adapt to it. So, things like that, my studying changed over time because of that. That's the other reason why if you take too long, you've got to always keep studying new stuff, which you still need to as a CTA, but, passing the exam, you need to make sure that you're aware of what the latest and greatest. That is full GA, no beta, no pilot, but that's full GA.
And just do a little comment in the chat. By the way, speaking of the event-driven architecture, the integration templates that are on Lucid, I hope all of you have checked those out. They are fantastic. If you haven't started using them, I highly recommend it. They are such a great kickstart to your build. It will definitely help. Yeah, sorry, totally off subject, but yeah.
No, that's great advice. Yeah, they really are awesome. Yeah.
Hey, Angel, one question. So how we plan our study plan? What is the reference? I mean, we need to go to all the Salesforce latest stuff and we need to prepare our own study plan, or is there any, a document we can refer? What and all we need to prepare for CTA?
Yeah, that's a great question. No, the study plan is really a personal thing because we all have different levels of experience. So if you're in an organization or you've been on projects that you've been working extensively with complex integrations, platform events, external objects, things like that, that's not an area that you will probably need to study a lot in. Maybe you need to look at your limits and make sure you understand the limits of the platform events and deliveries and things like that, but not necessarily from a solutioning standpoint. But you might not have a lot of experience let's say in Experience Cloud, I know I keep picking on Experience Cloud, but let's say you don't have a lot of practical experience in Experience Cloud, that should be part of your personal action plan. So putting that together is really a personal thing. And, you know, even if I could show you mine, if I would have had it handy, it really is because of the areas that I felt that I needed to study on. So this is something that each and every one of you should take some time to really go through and map that out. And like I said, for me, and probably for everyone, it's going to be a living document, because it's not like you're going to identify every single area that you really need to study or get more experience on, because as new features are released, or as you start going through this, you might find other areas that you need to understand a little bit more. So, you know, it's going to vary person to person. You know, I'll tell you, because again, because Salesforce is so broad, the composite API, I honestly did not know probably a year and a half ago or so that even existed. When I found out about the composite API at one of our user group meetings, I'm like, I need to study this. I need to figure this out. So then I put that on my list, and, you know, I got comfortable with understanding the composite API, what the use cases are for it, when I would bring that into my solutioning, and how I would explain it. So, you know, it's going to depend.
Okay, Angel, I would say that one of the mitigation things, you brought up your user group. So if you're not at a big company that exposes you to a lot of these topics, having access to a user group where you can bring up those topics and say, hey, I don't understand. I've never heard of the composite API. Has anybody worked with that? That is a great place to gain that accessory information. It's not as great as if you can, you know, pick your project and jump into the fire, but finding those expert panels, joining those groups, and having open communication to be able to, and I'm going to reach out to you because I've not heard of the composite API, and that's a great thing to know. And this is one of my best sources for learning that kind of stuff, if I'm not getting it on project.
Totally agree, Paul. As a matter of fact, I heard of the composite API at the user group meeting, like I mentioned, because, you know, back then, you know, it's one of those things I had never worked with, but we had someone else in the group that had, and they did a whole presentation on it. It was amazing. So yeah, your local user group, you know, whether it's a virtual one. I know, Paul, you do yours virtually too, right?
We've gone back in person, but I'm staying hybrid. I've gathered up enough tech equipment that I think I can sit down, and with an hour of prep, I can get online and in person going as a one-man show with a lot of bags. But it's tough.
There you go. Well, look for you if you don't have a developer group locally, or one that you can drive to reasonably. Look for groups that are still doing either virtual or hybrid, like Paul's group. Unfortunately, the Fort Lauderdale, we kicked back up and we're just doing in person right now. We might talk about that with the other co-leaders. Maybe we can start doing the hybrid one like Paul is doing, but definitely try to leverage that within the community, and leverage some of the, you know, the study time, like in Melissa's group, like Megan mentioned, the Monday, Wednesday, Friday during noon, where someone's usually talking about some of these areas, and you might learn something new there. I know I did.
And one thing to call out about the user groups is the great thing about so many groups still being virtual is I probably go to at least 15 different cities worth of user groups a month. I am always hopping around. I just go to the Trailblazer user groups website and I look for cool topics. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, the calendar view. I'm going to drop that link. There's a view where you can just go look at the calendar and see what's going on tomorrow. That is my favorite link.
Now that they have the new architect groups too, you can get architect specialized user group meetings, which are fabulous. I've gone to a couple of those. They're awesome. Yeah, because they're just architects sitting around talking about exactly this stuff.
Can you put those links in the chat? So
Yeah, this is awesome, Paul. I didn't know that there was a calendar view to it. I'm actually going to make sure I keep that link. Yeah, and there's a Tampa architect group. Yeah, the architect groups are taking off right now. So I think those would be, you know, a great source because they're really going to be focused more on the architecture side. But don't forget the developer groups, because again, from a technical standpoint, a lot of the content there, you know, overlaps.
And not everywhere has the architect groups, but pretty much everywhere has a dev group. Yeah.
Yes, yes, totally agree. What else? What else? Do we have other questions?
Oh, and really quick, don't forget the women in tech groups. We're not just user group leaders that I have run groups just for women. They're for allies as well. And we do technical topics and it's a lot of fun. So don't forget about your women in tech groups to check out too.
Yeah, they only started letting us do architect groups recently. So 2 years ago, when I was trying to convince people to do architect groups, we had to do them kind of outside of the Trailblazer community.
Hence we started this group. Yeah.
Yeah, hence this. That's what led to that. And then, but yeah, I still run my dev group as an architect group. I am not a hardcore developer. I'm an architect with some dev leanings. So I try to keep it dev focused, but it is always.
You're super dev. Come on, man.
Some of my
Other
code is good.
questions? What else we got? Anything in the chat? So your code is good. I've seen it.
You don't want to see
Alright.
mine.
You don't want to see mine either. You can check out my Slack code, but don't look at my Salesforce code.
I've just been doing it forever. I wrote my first virus in 1991. It's just Rolling Stone gathers moss as long as you roll for a long, long time.
I was chilling in the first grade. It was at least fourth grade before I wrote that Hanson website that I made. Yeah. That was my first code, my Hanson website.
I can't remember the last time I actually wrote code that made it to production. But you know, you have to be able to read it and understand it and make sure that best practices are being followed, making sure that the code is secure, because you are going to need to do that from time to time and give guidance. But I think as an architect, especially when you're working in these big projects, you've got so many things that you're working on. And even in the CTA board, you know, no one's looking for you to actually write an LWC or, you know, a batch Apex or anything like that. There's, you know, as architects, we're really focused on much bigger problems than, you know, how to properly structure, you know, a batch class or something like that.
Now, and so Anish asked on the chat, do you need to know code for CTA? And I'm going to ask for the exam because that was my next question was, do you feel like knowing how to code is a requirement for being a CTA level architect?
I think knowing how to code is helpful. It's definitely going to help you a lot in your day-to-day. That you will actually code is different. Like I said, I might work on a POC or something like that, but your time as a CTA or a technical architect is honestly too valuable to be writing code. You're solving bigger problems.
And I think knowing the limits is probably more important. When to code versus when to declarative, and knowing what's going to get messy. I think that's really where it comes into play more than anything. What is going to be messy code versus what's going to be messy declarative? I
think you can be an architect, a good architect, without having coded, but I think code lets you run into those layers that are kind of glossed over in branding speak a lot faster. So I think if you're paralleling learning code, you will run into topics of, oh, wait, what's the difference between a function and Salesforce functions? They're the same word. You wouldn't know them unless you actually sat down or you wouldn't know that there was a difference by the way people are talking about them unless you got a little closer to it. Composite APIs. Okay, is that just an API that's composite, or is that its own unique thing.
I would say learning APIs and knowing how to code are separate, because knowing what each API does is different than knowing how to code. And knowing, but there is an entire article on Ladies Be Architects about one of the ladies that became a CTA and she has never written code.
Yeah,
you can.
Yeah, totally. And because I mean, again, the way the exam is structured, you need to be able to distinguish, when you're going to do things declaratively versus programmatic. But during the exam, at no point are they saying, well, how are you going to, call this class, or how are you going to structure this class, or what methods are you going to use, things like that, and never gets into that detail. Again, and in my experience, while it's helpful that you know how to code, especially in the really large projects where you might have to mentor some of your junior devs, or do some review of some code that's just horribly blowing up, you do need to have an understanding of the structure of that code, your limits, things like that. But writing code, I don't think that that's 100% necessary. Is it helpful? Absolutely. Is it going to be helpful on your projects? Definitely.
And I think the only time that I've really coded on my projects as a technical architect is when I've been helping my junior devs.
Yeah.
And they needed to understand a theory and I had to show them. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or in code review when I showed them how to fix something. Yeah.
Yeah. Or what you touched on a little bit.
Or a
earlier,
POC.
Megan. Yeah. Or exactly. Or what you touched on a little bit earlier, which is some developer wants to come back and I want to do it in an LWC, and you're like, why? Why can't you do it in a flow? Oh yeah, I could do it in a flow, but I've always wanted to do an LWC. Well, no, that's not the reason.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
You got to
my
be able to weigh
favorite.
you got to be able to
That or
weighing
I don't like
the
flow.
pathways.
Yeah. Yeah.
My favorite response is, I don't like flow. I like code. But then you don't care. It's not your org.
You should do everything in flows. Except
say
for lock
that.
records and stuff that you can do in Salesforce functions. Oh, we
was
should have a whole
li-
session on that.
Yeah.
That was literally my answer. Is it's all going to be in flow now. So just do it.
Yeah.
It was horrible.
I've inherited multiple orgs for different, and I've always been on the client side, but I've learned so much, and I see what people did and what they built. I'm like, why did you do this? Like, we're doing case auto responses in a flow. I don't know why, but we're going to be changing that. Does not need a flow. So things like that, right? So talking about coding, right? When you go to inherit a very large org that's been built for many years, if you don't have the coding skills, it makes it very hard to go dig and understand what people built and go chase it. So it definitely makes you better at your job to know it.
It does. And especially those older orgs, they didn't, especially the ones that didn't have good governance. Everyone was coming in with their own style, and some really loved flows and they were building everything in flows, and like what you ran into, and some were hardcore developers, so everything was code. So you get into a lot of this tech debt that there was no structure around what was being built, and now you need to take a step back and figure out how are we going to clean this up.
So we have another question. What is the difference between enterprise architect and CTA? So since you've taken the certification, Angel, why don't you take that one?
Yeah. So I mean, so the enterprise architect certification, I don't think it's out yet. I think
it hasn't been announced. I don't think.
It's been announced. It's just not out.
And he's asking about the EA role, and I think that's the question. It's EA role versus CTA role, and
okay.
So I mean, there are some overlaps in my opinion. But the EA is usually looking at enterprise wide, not just Salesforce. ERP might be responsible for the ERP space, might be responsible for the middleware area. So the EA role is a broad role, very similar to CTA. But the CTA, you have that Salesforce focus. But as a CTA, you do have a lot of overlap with EA because you're expected to solution, some of the integration. Now, you might be working with an integration architect or an enterprise architect, depending on the organization that you're working in. So there are a lot of overlaps. Just for EA, though, I don't think that there's any strict certifications around that. Salesforce did come up with this great, idea of having their technical architects with at least guaranteeing or checking for a certain level of knowledge, which led to the CTA, which I think is amazing.
And
for the broader EA, there is a TOGAF certification, which is an enterprise architecture framework. And I think your explanation was perfect. A CTA, one, that's a certification, and what you're expected to be is I believe, and just in my own words, is a Salesforce centric enterprise architect. And enterprise architect may not have the same focus, but it is about assembling big solutions where Salesforce is one of the components of the solution. TOGAF is an EA certification. There's another one. I consider CISSP an EA realm certification, which is a very broad, it gets out to the physical, but it's more scoped around the security of the components you're bringing in, which I think CTAs really have to understand, especially when there's a lot of security concern when you hop in and out of the very Salesforce centric platform.
Stepping outside of certifications, what I kind of think of the enterprise architect, when you're looking at a CTA, you're looking at the integrations that touch Salesforce. When I play the enterprise architect role, I do the integrations that are outside of Salesforce, connecting outside of Salesforce. So if they have external systems that connect to each other, I still run those integrations as well, and those systems too, in any build that happens in those, not just the Salesforce build. So I kind of picture it as full landscape instead of just the Salesforce centric landscape.
Right. I mean, but you touch on all those same points, right? Because if you're outside of Salesforce, you're still dealing with your integration architecture, what systems you're connecting to. More on the CTA standpoint, you're looking at, well, which systems am I integrating to from Salesforce or with Salesforce, and what are the patterns? That's why it's really important to know your integration patterns, know about security and how you're going to secure all these connections and things like that. So you really do touch on that EA space, but again, very CTA focused.
And if you don't have a pattern that you're using across all your integrations, you need to rethink the way you're doing your project for your integrations. You need a pattern across them. It's not just a free for all. I had that on a project once for the integration guys, just do whatever. And it's like, oh, no, I'm going to take over this integration piece and we're going to do them the same each way. I can't handle that type of chaos. Yeah.
And so a recent client, I'm working with their integration team and they want to just publish Kafka events and then, you just subscribe to this event. And we're like, well, we need for you to, push the data through the API, because while Salesforce can publish an event, we're consuming from Kafka needs to follow a different pattern. So having those conversations, knowing how you're going to design that when, you've got an integration architect that wants to do it a certain way that doesn't know Salesforce, having that conversation from that Salesforce lens.
I knew on my old project. We literally went through that same thing.
Oh no, I've gone through it on my project too. We had just finished having like a 2-week conversation of Kafka in, Kafka out, REST to Kafka, streaming to Kafka. And then of course, we have our own internal Kafka, but we don't want to, we want to use this to front that. So you can't use that and you need to go through this. And okay, well, we need to redesign to meet the client's, model, even if it's different from yours. Yep.
That could literally be like 4 of my old projects with the whole concept of they just want to do this, but that's not the way it works. Yeah. I love it.
Yep. I've been aware. I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's gotta be something nice about the CTA is you don't have to deal with the client. You get to actually come up with a design with people that know Salesforce. So does that make it easier, Angel, than trying to work on a client project, the CTA exam?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, the fact that, sorry. I got my AC blowing because it just hit 90. So the fact that you don't have to deal with a client and you're dealing with people that actually know Salesforce, does that make the CTA exam easier than, let's say, like a project design?
Well, yes and no. Yes, because it's Salesforce focused with even all the integrations and the security and whatever you're designing, all your external systems are around Salesforce. No, from the aspect of these guys and gals, the judges, they know Salesforce really well, and they know enterprise architecture really well. So, you really need to be very good at solutioning, because they're going to start picking that apart. And I think, with clients, it's a little bit different in that, most of the time, especially in the EA space, most of the EAs that I've worked with, I've had to educate them on Salesforce, because they might be great enterprise architects, but they don't know that much about Salesforce per se.
Gotcha. So it's the fact that they know so much that makes it more difficult versus the fact that they don't know anything and they're trying to throw you into some weird space.
Yeah. And then
Yeah,
you're
okay.
educating them, and then you're guiding them through, well,
Yeah.
no, we can't consume, a Kafka topic, right?
Right.
We're going to have to do it this way. We're going to need to bring in, Confluent or something to, translate that Kafka topic, into an API call into Salesforce, or whatever pattern you're going to use there. Yeah.
And then quick, going back to the CTA exam, how up to date are the exams to the release notes? Like, are they in the most current release, or are they like a release behind?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know the answer to that. That might be great to have Suzanne on at some point for her to share that. I was always at least reviewed the release notes to be aware of any changes. I don't know if they're all of a sudden going to like expect you to use
Right.
something that was just released in summer 22.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that you can't. So, I mean, if you
Right.
know of a feature that was released in summer 22 and it'll make your life easier solutioning, and you're comfortable explaining it, by
Go
all
for it.
means. Yeah, I would
Okay.
totally go for it. As long as it's GA. The rule
Yeah.
that I've always
Oh.
heard, the
Okay.
rule that I've always, I never heard this from Salesforce, but the rule that I've always heard in the community is, as long as it's GA, it's fair game. I always stayed away from pilot or beta. So for
That is
example,
really good to know,
yeah,
because all that Slack stuff's beta right now. Yeah. For example.
I would be careful with that, because beta, they can come back, and if they for sure know it's beta, and they probably would,
Yep.
they can start asking you questions. Well, what if Salesforce decides not to release that?
Yeah.
It
Okay.
has happened.
It has. Yeah. I've seen it, they've delayed it, like the DevOps Center.
Or they delayed it. I think the maps component of LWC has been in beta for like 2 years or something like that, So,
That's
it's one of
really
those
good
things.
to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then what about the idea? So I hear this one all the time too. You should always pick the Salesforce product if you're going between Salesforce and there's something else. Do you pick the Salesforce product, or if you're a Boomi person, do you pick Boomi? Like,
that's a great question. How I presented, I always talked about my middleware or my ESB. I don't think I ever explicitly said MuleSoft or Informatica or Boomi or anything like that. I think if they would have pressed me, I probably would have said MuleSoft. At least in all my scenarios that I practiced, I always left it open there.
gotcha.
I don't remember about the board right now, but I always talked in where I'm going to have an ESB, I'm going to have a middleware layer that's going to have this and that, and but I think everyone's different. I think a lot of people do normally go into MuleSoft, at least in the boards the mock boards that I've judged, going to MuleSoft. If it's if you need some marketing campaigns and things like that, you kind of generally go to Marketing Cloud. I don't know if there's a requirement that you solution that way. I think it's kind of just we're dealing with Salesforce technology and they have something. It makes sense that I just use Salesforce technology here.
I asked Andy that same question when he was on a couple of months ago, and his answer was, talk to the options and that the options. But when you get to specifics, use specific. It's okay to use specifics on what you know.
Yeah.
If you've done Jitterbit, AutoRabbit, and you need to talk about and haven't done the Salesforce product, you can speak to that solution. I think as long as you know the components of the problem, not necessarily, and how to address them, not necessarily which product to address them with. That was his advice when I asked him that.
I think that's fair, because this exam is not about MuleSoft, right? It's not about Marketing Cloud. You need to know what your middleware layer is going to do, and you need to know some high-level capabilities of there, and explain how you're going to integrate it, or how you're going to integrate to Marketing Cloud. But they're not going to start asking you about creating a BU and what you're going to use as your subscriber key and all that other fun stuff that comes into Marketing Cloud.
Speaking of MuleSoft, I don't know if you've taken the MuleSoft Certified Architect class and exam yet, but I just took the class. I highly recommend it, Angel, to become a MuleSoft Certified Technical Architect. It's really fun.
I've been thinking of that. Thanks for the feedback there. I have to take a look at it. They've
got one that's just on Fridays too, so you don't have to do like a whole week. You can just do the Fridays for a month.
That's cool.
Which is like the quiet day of the week. Yeah.
I'll look into that. I've been trying to figure out doing B2B or B2C certification.
I've got those scheduled for July. Yeah. I'll keep you posted on how they are.
Yeah, let me know. I think someone mentioned it somewhere.
Somebody asked the question on if the B2B and the B2C certifications help with CTA.
I do not have them. I think Melissa has them, and a few others. And I've heard from them that they believe that it was helpful. I just didn't. Those became available around the time that I was already on the journey, so I didn't want to take a detour for them. But from what I've heard, they are good, and I do want to pursue them.
And I'm more than happy to give an update on the July Road to CTA event about whether or not they have anything to do with the stuff we've been learning about and that's been on the journey track from my classes. Yeah.
I think that would be awesome. Yeah. Please keep me posted.
Oh, absolutely. Do. I'll DM you. You got it. And then did you get asked about licensing costs, Angel? That licensing question is a big one that always seems to come up. Yeah.
Licensing is big. The guidance, and that should be covered in 601, but the guidance is budget should not be a constraint. With that said, you can't just say, I'm going to give Sales and Service Cloud to everyone. You have to think about the right license that you're proposing based on the needs of that user. So, hey, they need cases, so I'm going to give them, because this is someone that's going to be doing support. I'm going to give them Service Cloud. Hey, this person needs leads and opportunities. I'm going to give them, Sales Cloud. This is Partner Portal, but or this is a partner, but this partner doesn't need leads, access to leads or anything like that. So can I use Customer Community Plus, because I still need an advanced sharing model, instead of Partner Portal Community, right? Licenses. So all those are considerations that you still need to keep in mind as to the capabilities that you need them. You need to give the persona or the user, but cost should not be a factor. So, saying, oh, I'm going to do this because of cost, unless it's in the scenario, right?
Yeah.
Unless it's explicitly called out, or the judge throws you a curveball later on and starts asking about cost, then it becomes part of it. But I mean, especially in the scenarios that are out there in the public, there's not a single scenario that brings in cost into any of the solutioning, at least none of the ones that I've seen.
And then for all of you on the call, just a heads up, I have been working and it just keeps growing, but I think I have finally wrapped up a blog post about all of the different Experience Cloud licenses for partner, channel, customer, and customer community plus an external identity. And I've got a flow chart too with what you need and which bridge to go on. And I should be posting that next week. Yeah. So that'll hopefully help with any Experience Cloud licensing questions that you guys have for the project or any projects, as well as the CTA exam.
Yeah. An important thing to also know in the licensing is the amount of storage that you get, because that could come up if you've got large volumes of records that you need to figure out if you're going to store them on platform or off platform. So knowing the storage that comes along with each of these licenses is going to help there.
And I also have the Lightning Starter and the external apps that go into like the partner licenses with the extra storage and the extra API calls. Good call out. That was something that I have dealt with so many times on projects. Is not enough storage. Yeah.
That happens, and Salesforce storage is really expensive. So
It's so expensive.
Figuring that out is really important, because you might have to put some things off platform and then use something like external objects or Heroku Connect or whatever you decide to use, to solve for that.
And I gotta ask, because I think this comes up at least every call for Melissa's call. What about files and file sharing? Does that come up often for you? Because I think we talk about that on Melissa's call like every week. Yeah.
I hate that was the worst part.
It's such a pain in the butt.
I totally is. But yes, no, and that really comes into play as, are you going to be able to keep the files that are being generated on platform? Yeah, because on platform makes a lot of things a lot easier. Like if you need to share it, and if you need to make it accessible from a search standpoint, whether internal or external, keeping it in platform. But then if you've got these huge volumes of files, are you able to keep the working files on platform and then have a facility to offload them to like an S3 bucket or, to a document management system like SharePoint or whatever it is, but then you have to consider, how am I going to share those still with the people that need to gain access to it as I move them off platform? So all those considerations, really important to keep that in mind and to have a solution for that. That was one of the areas that I remember I struggled a lot with, making sure that I would be able to present a good, coherent solution to keep all that in mind. So yeah, and it's not something that I've run into a lot. So, that was another area that I needed to study a lot in.
And then we're getting to the top of the hour. Any other questions from you all? Angel, I know you probably want to get back to your day, but you have been so phenomenal. And thank you so much for answering so many of our questions. You've been just rock star. Team attendees, anything else? So we got quiet. Can we give a second, just time? But yeah, Angel,
thanks so much, Angel. Yeah, so fantastic awesome stuff.
Would you mind sharing your deck with me so that I can share it with the video?
Yeah, no worries. I'll send it to you. Yeah.
You are a rock star. And again, dude, this was so great. And thank you everyone for your participation. This was awesome. I can't wait till next month. We're going to have a great time. And you mentioned somebody else to have on the show. So Angel, if you wouldn't mind just staying an extra minute, I would love to find out who that was and how to get in touch with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but no, thank you all. And I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Angel.
Thank you, guys.